If you feel like everyone is more anxious in 2026, you're not imagining it. Today, we unravel why. In February 2026, a study published in the journal Nature Genetics mapped the biological architecture of anxiety on a massive scale, providing a scientific baseline for understanding mental distress. A global research team including scientists from Texas A and M University, Dalhousie University, King's College London, and LMU Munich analysed genetic data from 122,341 clinically diagnosed anxiety cases alongside nearly 730,000 controls. Led by researchers Nora I. Strom, Brad Verhulst, and Silviu Alin Bacanu, this work identified 58 independent genetic variants scattered across our DNA that correlate with major anxiety disorders, including panic and phobias. These genetic markers point to 66 specific protein-coding genes, many of which drive GABAergic signaling, the brain's primary chemical pathway responsible for slowing down overactive nerve cells and regulating fear. When researchers tested these findings against an independent replication group of more than 1.1 million self-reported cases, 51 of those 58 variants appeared with the exact same direction of effect, confirming a highly consistent, shared biological pattern. Yet, this inherited risk is probabilistic, rather than deterministic. Genetics shapes our baseline sensitivity. It does not map out an inevitable blueprint for panic. There is no single anxiety gene that dictates a person's life, and these statistical associations are not a biological sentence. Instead, clinical data shows that anxiety exists on a broader internalizing spectrum, sharing its roots with other mental struggles. The genetic overlap with other emotional conditions is vast. Linkage disequilibrium regression shows that anxiety correlates with major depression at a coefficient of 0.65 to 0.90, with post-traumatic stress disorder at 0.55 to 0.85, and with neurotic traits at roughly 0.70. A person inheriting this vulnerability receives a highly responsive neural alarm system shared across multiple emotional states, rather than an isolated disease. This heritable machinery has existed within our species for thousands of years. But if our biology has remained relatively stable over generations, we must ask, why is this ancient physical vulnerability becoming so visible and overwhelming right now? The daily rhythm of 2026 does not match the biology of the humans living it. We wake to a cascade of digital inputs, instantly pulling our attention in multiple directions before our feet even touch the floor. Stress has shifted from an occasional reaction to a temporary threat into our ambient atmosphere, a quiet, humming background noise that rarely turns off. In this environment, the nervous system remains on constant alert, scanning a steady stream of notifications, emails, and alerts as if they were physical dangers. This continuous engagement leaves little room for cognitive recovery. When every moment of potential quiet is filled by a screen, the brain loses the blank spaces it needs to process the day. Sleep quality degrades under this endless daylight, arriving late and fragmented as the mind struggles to decelerate. This sleep disruption is a daily friction point, a sign that the speed of our lives is outrunning our physical ability to rest. The pressure is especially acute during the transition into adulthood. In our 20s and 30s, the tasks of building a career, securing housing, and establishing an identity collide with an increasingly volatile job market and rising costs of living. Responsibility increases just as stability seems to withdraw. We are asked to make long-term decisions in a culture that operates on short-term attention spans. rewarding speed and constant availability while splitting our focus across multiple tasks, screens, and obligations. This mismatch between our natural evolutionary capacity and the demands placed on us by modern society transforms our internal state. The human alarm system, built to respond to brief, intense crises like physical predators, is run continuously at a low burn. What we experience as a personal struggle, with worry or physical exhaustion, is the direct toll of trying to keep pace with a world that does not sleep, does not slow down, and does not disconnect. Our biology is responding exactly as designed to an environment that never stops asking for more. The outside world has systematically reshaped the inside of our minds. We communicate across hundreds of miles in milliseconds, sending messages, sharing images, and maintaining a constant digital presence. Yet this continuous contact often lacks actual closeness. We have swapped physical proximity for digital reach, leaving our social circles wide but incredibly thin. Our screens keep us constantly available, but they rarely keep us connected. A study published in the journal PLOS Mental Health examined these modern social dynamics in adults aged 18 to 34, mapping how our social and economic environments drive mental distress. The research team analysed several key life pressures to determine what correlates most strongly with clinical anxiety. Their findings revealed that the single strongest social association with anxiety was rare in-person socializing. No amount of online messaging or digital interaction compensated for the physical absence of other human beings. The authors of the study also identified other primary social and economic pressures that elevate anxiety risk, specifically long-term unemployment, a history of childhood or adult trauma, and experiences of bullying or peer exclusion. For isolated young adults, excluded workers, and socially exhausted people, these factors compound. The modern environment has slowly dismantled the informal networks that once supported individuals through difficult times. Loneliness is a structural hazard of our current lifestyle, rather than a personal failure or an individual emotional error. Historically, human survival depended on the tribe, and close relationships acted as a biological shield. Our nervous systems are wired to co-regulate with others. When we lack real-world connection, the brain perceives the world as inherently hostile. Without a supportive group to share the load, ordinary daily struggles are registered by our biology as major, immediate threats. We are forced to face a demanding world entirely on our own, keeping our internal alarm systems running on high alert. This constant state of social isolation keeps us scanning for threats, wearing down our physical and mental reserves. We are left running on empty, carrying an exhaustion that we rarely get to resolve. Often, this systemic fatigue hides within our most fundamental nightly routine, where the struggle to cope with an isolated world directly disrupts our ability to sleep. Sleep science researchers have identified sleep disruption as a direct driver of anxiety. Rather than a secondary symptom, broken sleep actively accelerates the brain's threat response. In fact, poor sleep stands as the single strongest predictor of developing anxiety. When we miss out on restorative sleep, we lose our primary biological reset. A single broken night alters how the brain handles stress, shifting the neural baseline so that the next day, ordinary situations are experienced as immediate, high-stakes threats. This shift turns a bad night into a physical feedback loop. Without sufficient slow wave and REM sleep, the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, becomes hyper-reactive,
while the prefrontal cortex struggles to regulate it. The nervous system gets stuck in a state of high alert, interpreting neutral environments as hostile. This makes sleep an immediate, practical lever. Unlike our genes or broad economic structures, our nightly rest is a modifiable risk factor. Improving how we sleep directly dampens the brain's threat processing systems, offering a clear way to interrupt the cycle of worry. Yet, protecting this biological necessity has become an uphill battle. The modern world systematically chips away at our rest, demanding constant digital engagement and turning the bedroom into an extension of the workplace. We are left trying to calm a highly sensitive evolutionary alarm system, while the environment around us refuses to let us quiet down.
The financial reality of 2026 is defined by a slow, wearing instability that has integrated itself into daily survival. For workers, renters, and students, uncertainty is the baseline environment rather than an occasional crisis to be weathered. The modern labour market demands constant adaptability, frequently replacing long-term security with the temporary arrangements of contract work and gig employment. When your livelihood can be restructured or automated away at short notice, vigilance becomes a necessary survival strategy. It is an active defence mechanism. At the same time, the basic milestones of a stable life, secure housing, reliable savings, and a predictable path forward feel increasingly out of reach. As the cost of basic needs rises, the horizon of the future shrinks. People find themselves planning in weeks and months rather than years or decades. This constriction of time creates a quiet, persistent pressure, a sense that one financial misstep could compromise everything. This economic precarity is amplified by a culture that moves faster than our brains can naturally process. Information no longer arrives in daily cycles. It flows in a relentless, global stream. We do not choose to consume this data. We live inside it. It functions like emotional weather, a constant downpour of global crises, market shifts, and social demands that we are expected to metabolize in real time. When the systems around us are permanently unstable, our biology adapts to match them. The mind learns that safety is temporary and threat is constant. This is how broad economic and cultural realities translate into individual physical responses. The constant demand to adapt, to produce, and to scan for the next disruption forces the nervous system to remain hyper alert. This is a direct reflection of the actual conditions of our lives. The external environment has slowly patterned itself onto our internal biology, transforming a rational response to an unstable world into a chronic state of physical worry.
The blueprint of a highly reactive nervous system is often drafted in our earliest years. Long before we encounter the complex pressures of adult employment or financial instability, our brains are already learning how safe the world is. Early adversity, whether through physical neglect, emotional instability, or the persistent exclusion of childhood bullying, acts as an architect of our internal state. It alters how we perceive trust, security, and self-worth, training the developing brain to expect danger as the baseline setting. For a child, these early relationships and experiences are the primary classroom for learning how the world works. When a young person experiences ongoing stress, their nervous system makes a logical, physical adaptation. It permanently raises its baseline vigilance. This change is a highly effective survival strategy rather than a neurological error. If the early environment is unpredictable or hostile, remaining on constant alert is the only rational way to protect oneself. The developing brain prioritizes immediate survival over long-term peace, favoring defense over rest. As we grow, these defensive adaptations can become the very scaffolding of our identity. The behaviors that once kept us safe, such as constant scanning for disapproval, chronic people-pleasing, or a persistent difficulty in trusting others, harden into adult personality traits. What we classify in clinics as chronic anxiety is frequently this exact system of learned protection, continuing to run its defensive program long after the original threat has vanished. The adult mind remains built around a core of self-preservation, carrying a physical nervous system that stays organized around old, historical dangers. We live as adults with the bodies of children who had to learn to hide, to run, or to fight. Understanding this shifts the conversation. It moves anxiety away from being a personal deficit or a moral failure and places it in the category of self-defense. This chronic worry functions as a lingering, well-worn shield rather than a random weakness. Yet, when this defensive system remains active in a world that is already structurally chaotic, the burden becomes incredibly heavy. It forces us to look outward. If our internal alarms are shaped by past struggles, and our external environments are constantly flashing red, we must ask, is the struggle we feel really an individual illness, or is it simply a natural response to a world that has become fundamentally unlivable? Our ancient biology remains optimized for a world that no longer exists. For nearly all of human history, we lived in small, tightly knit bands, numbering no more than a few dozen individuals. In those small groups, threats were immediate, tangible, and local. A predator in the brush, a sudden storm, a rival tribe. Our threat detection systems, forged over millions of years, evolved to process these brief crises and then quickly return to a state of rest. Today, that same internal hardware is subjected to the infinite scale, relentless speed, and constant instability of a digital society. We are exposed to remote planetary crises, economic volatility, and social isolation all at once, overwhelming a system designed for a quiet forest. Because our biology cannot distinguish between a physical threat to survival and the ambient stress of modern life, the internal alarm runs indefinitely. Seen through this evolutionary lens, chronic anxiety is a fully rational response of a normal human body trapped in an irrational environment, rather than an individual defect. Recognizing this mismatch shifts the burden of blame. When we understand that our distress is a predictable reaction to a demanding world, we can stop fighting our own biology. This clarity is where resilience begins. We cannot instantly change the speed of modern life, but understanding the forces shaping our worry offers a way to endure them with clear eyes and steady ground. Perhaps the quiet panic of our era is not a malfunction, but a signal that we are paying attention. In a world designed to overwhelm us, feeling this friction is proof of our humanity, not our defeat. Understanding this does not cure the chaos, but it gives us the clarity to survive it together. What helps you find quiet in the noise? Let us discuss in the comments.